Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Schröder, for this invitation to speak in this very impressive lineup of people. My first sentence that I wrote down was, thank you, to speak about time on one of the most timed events I have ever been to. That was my expectation when seeing your schedule. Time is what I was taught to be afraid of. In our practice, noAarchitecten in Brussels, I've always experienced time as an essential element in our approach. Whether to continue on the work of others who started something long before us, like here in the Steen in Antwerp, where we tried to materialize time in brickwork together with artist Pieter Vermeers in the extension, you see. Or as in the small community house Router Park in Brussels, where we made a new building on exactly the same spot of the villa of the former head of the factory that used to stand there. And somehow, because of putting the new house there, the trees also found again their reason for being where they are. From the beginning, we have loved to engage with who and what was already there, developing a certain trust in past movements and presences. We have left the idea of making timeless architecture behind us, as in that we welcome time to have an impact on the buildings we make, trying to let go of control. When many months ago the invitation came to speak, I must have overlooked a 15-minute request, and I actually, unfortunately, chose a very large, I realized probably 1,000 times the scale of the Kleines Café project to talk about. So I will not go as far in detail as we have heard before, but just talk a bit about, I'll try to situate the project and talk about our approach on certain aspects. So KANAL Centre Pompidou is a museum project, art museum project in Brussels in a former Citroën garage. And it's a project we've been working on now since 2017, together with IDA25-11 from Zurich and Sergeson Bates from London. And we called our project, and at the time of the competition, A Stage for Brussels. KANAL is situated here. This is the center of Brussels, like the really central part. This is the KANAL, and it's really on that crossing of two worlds, you could say. And it's very important because it's situated in an area called Molenbeek, which at 2016, probably you've all heard of it, became the sort of heart of all the people involved in the terrorist attacks across Europe. So the fact that the region, the government of Brussels bought this garage in that location to dedicate it fully to art and architecture and culture in general was, I think, very brave and optimistic. We also talked at the time of radical optimism. And you see here an image of last week, the building under construction. It spans 100 meters between the street and the canal and 200 meters in length, and it contains around 40,000 square meters. It is a former Citroën factory, and it has these facades along the canal and along one of the main entry routes to the city. And then it has one iconic building at the center, the one to the right, which used to be the showroom where people could buy a car and then just drive out into town. André Citroën had a big hand in the design of this building. It was conceived in 1933. This is a very idealized picture of what it could become. And it was built in only 2 years' time, talking about time and winning time and being fast. They were really fast. And you see here the showroom being erected, from the inside. And then the steel construction for the factory behind it, which, as the legend goes, took only 6 weeks to assemble on site. And then you see also this modernist, smooth facade that was wrapped around it with this very thin glass skin that wrapped around this, one could say, still typical 19th century factory hall with a lot of daylight coming from the sides, but also from the top. And this is how we found, same spot, the building. 2015 I visited first, and 2017 the competition started. And you see that they have added a floor to, of course, increase the surface. And we decided, although all the historical images showed this very beautiful, pure space, to keep the floors and to keep everything that was in place. Some images made by Kim Zwarts, the empty building. The skin and the fact that facade and floor really don't match. So this whole, the mask, the skin and the content are really two very different worlds. And then that long spine of 200 meters that connects the showroom with that factory that we look into here behind it. You see here the spine, the ramps that are existing, and the showroom at the front. A showroom that was, of course, finished in very different ways than the front. One could buy a car or wait here. There was a hairdresser. You could read a newspaper, have a coffee, while men in the back would take care of your car. And then it had guillotine windows, so the moment you bought a car, you could step in and just become part of the city around it. The success of the car, though, had a big impact on the history of the garage, and you see here a viaduct that was built and that stayed for around 30 years. We speak 1958. And that, of course, impacted on the garage itself, and maybe you can see it, but floors had to be added so people could still look into the showroom from above. And that's how we found then one of these floors. So when we started to work on the competition, we decided to propose a very, very public building, a building that, a museum that wouldn't start with a ticket desk and then you could go in, but a building that would be mostly publicly accessible, with museum spaces for art and architecture at its heart. And we had, at the time, 5 big ideas, and we added another big idea a bit later. So I'll just go through those. I will not explain the project in detail, but this is the Citroën garage as found. And we decided the showroom remains the symbol. We do not add an architecture that wants to compete with that. We stay lower and we stay in the background. We extend the horizontality. You remember the sort of ideal sketch by trying to combine that horizontal space, which we liked a lot, a sort of very accessible space, to the showroom in the front. We believe in a strong public figure that would allow people to really get lost and wander. We heard about time as a walk. We add 3 new volumes, which really have to contain the climate that is necessary to keep art and show art. And we regard the rest of the building as a building that is seasonal, where the Jahreszeiten play out. So in winter it will be a bit cold, and in summer it might be a bit hot, except in these volumes. We believe that production had to be really at the heart of it, not just a museum of representation, but one where things are made by everyone. And then the new thing, and many have spoken about this before, was, and I love the German word, das Unvollendete. We believed we should make a building that is an invitation to change, that is in constant movement and process, except that we didn't and maybe still don't know how you really do that as an architect. So this is a plan that we made for the competition, and without going into detail, we tried really already then to imagine all the things that can happen in a building so vast as this one. We tried to write little stories and draw them. You see 3,000 people in this building, and it still is rather empty. But we tried to see how a human scale could relate, and time and use could relate to this huge factory. Same on the upper floor, where you see a large open space with these 3 new volumes really set at the heart of it. Protected, you could say, from the climate and the elements that come in through that thin facade that we restore, but we don't want to turn into a thermal, perfectly performative skin. The day before we had to hand in, I remember writing the last text of how we would approach it, and writing, if we would be selected, we will move in. And we will make our office with the 3 offices from Zurich, London, and Brussels in the building, one team working from within the building. And of course, we had to keep our word. So we moved in. And this is maybe the experience I would like to share with you, what it is to have a day-to-day relationship with the building you work on and in, and how this leads to a certain obsession, and then probably also leads to a certain obsessive architecture. So the team moved in, and the client also moved in, just a level above us, of course. So also with them, we had a day-to-day relationship. And the team moved in and went down and up. This is the former offices of the Citroën company. And we started to build and draw and look again and draw more. And maybe this is a sentence that came to mind when preparing this, sentence that I like very much. There's an immense difference between looking at something without pencil in the hand and looking at something while drawing it. And I think we did both. 3 minutes. Okay, looking at something while drawing it. You know, when you look and you keep looking and you draw and you keep drawing, it's an ongoing process. It's sometimes difficult to stop. So we met weekly with all the partners, with the whole team, and we kept on drawing, thinking, making. But at the same time, the client has planned an exhibition for 1.5 years. It was interrupted a bit by COVID, called KANAL Brut. And they planned to show art, performances, debates in the building. And we were, of course, being there, also part of that. So this is where we learned a lot from looking at something without a pencil in the hand. And I'll just show you some images. People suddenly queuing to get in. A building that had been just occupied by cars, suddenly being day in, day out, visited, used. We also saw that kids felt very, very comfortable, that art and space and people, here the Franz West sofas, were really exciting. Artists looking for spots under the ramps here to show their work. And then, of course, a lot of work from Centre Pompidou, but also from Brussels artists being shown here day and night. And we also experienced how, when it gets dark, this building becomes very, very different than during the day. Romeo Castellucci brought back the cars and some drama. So, loving this building more and more, we decided to touch it only lightly. And we started not only to draw, but also to document the layers of time, like you see in the first photography, but then also, you know, drawing all the patterns that we found on the floors. You can also see how cars changed over time, parking spaces becoming bigger, and how different layers and different old layers came to the front again when using the building. And we really liked this. And we really also understood we can never make something like that anew. So we started to document, seeing how columns were painted, also how columns were used as tool belts, very pragmatically, dealing with all the things we also have to deal with. And then happened the unforeseen. The paint we loved so much contained chrome 6, something that you don't want in a building when you restore it thoroughly. This is one of our collaborators taking pictures. in a building that needed to completely be protected and stripped of its paint. And we ended up with this vanilla color, you see to the right, interior, stripped of everything. So we thought paint, maybe we should bring in the eye of a painter. And we started a collaboration with artist Sarah Smulders, who also started to look, of course, before the paint was gone, at the building. And she looked a bit different at things. And she also got really sort of obsessed, intrigued with how paint was applied not to architectural elements, something we would be drawn to, but just across everything paint would meet. These are her obsessive pictures. We also started to then, of course, have to draw the ceilings, and she documented column per column. But this was maybe the most interesting thing. I think I need 3 more. This is Sarah, and Sarah started to look as a painter, not as an architect. And you see she started to reenact how the paint had been applied to the building before, seeing that never tape was used, never a ladder was used. Depending on the length of the person and the precision of the person, paint was neat or very messy. And depending on whether you could push yourself up with a balustrade and a little protection rim or not, heights would change. And this is when we got interested in bringing the scale of the person who contributes to the building into the project and celebrating somehow the hands that make the things we make up. So, her work, looking differently but even more obsessive than us, documenting every side of every column, but also looking at color as a painter and not as an art historian or archaeologist, as in what was the original green, but how have different greens aged with the gases of the cars, the dust, the different types, the different times that have taken over. So we came to a color palette, and now we are painting on a first level this building somehow in an interpretation of all the colors we found and selected, and you see some images of that. And then Sarah, with a number of people she will select, obviously of different heights, will sort of make a choreography of painting the last layer, a kind of horizon on all the columns that we meet. This is where we are today. And this is her choreography she's making up that I cannot show you yet. There is a book I just wanted to tell because I feel there's really so much to say. So if you're interested, I'm happy to talk about it, or you can look at it. And this is an image today. It looks very much like the image of the 30s. So we're back to where it all started. Thank you very much.